Welcome to another Bible in a Year Q&A. This is for May 15th through the 16th through the 30th, the second half of May. All right, there's an overview video I have also in the same playlist. So I'm going to go through the questions here. We got 6 or 7, I believe. First, the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verse 16. Why is Thomas called the twin? Some translations will have it just in the Greek, Didymus. We don't really have a clue. We don't know why. Maybe he was a twin. Maybe he looked like another of the apostles. Maybe it was just a nickname or something. Maybe he was a copycat of somebody. He was always. We don't know. Fun fact though. Fun family fact. So I have a brother named Thomas, and at one point growing up, we hear Thomas, also known as Didymus, mentioned in the Sunday Gospel every second Sunday after Easter. So one year when we heard it at Mass, we started calling my brother Thomas Didymus. He didn't like that. He still doesn't like that when we say, "Hey, Didymus." That's not my name, Thomas. Or he'll just ignore us. That was random factoids in my family. Next question. 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 24. Why did Solomon have Adajaya killed? All right, so Solomon has his brother Adajaya kill in chapter 2. First of all, he contests in chapter 1. There's kind of Adajaya tries to become king, and David was going to choose Solomon, so he's trying to take the kingdom there. So then Solomon says, "Okay, I'm not going to kill you. All right, you tried to take the kingdom, but you're under essentially house arrest. All right, kind of don't think about doing anything funny now. All right." And then he asks for one of David's servants, young maidens who his servants, and Solomon's like, no, he's not going to. He's trying to get a foothold. He's trying to take the kingdom, trying to get his foot in the door, and so essentially he's trying to usurp the kingdom, and so he's put to death. And part of the importance of by usurping the kingdom, it's not just Solomon's going to lose the kingdom, but it's going to cause chaos amongst the whole nation, kind of the uproar and such. And so this is Adonijah's, you can look it up. All right, chapter 2, verse 24. In that same chapter, 1 Kings 2, verse 46, asks, is Benaiah King Solomon's henchman? Yes, I guess you could call him that. He's kind of, and that refers to which Shimei, who actually was cursing David back in 2 Samuel as David was leaving. His son Absalom was taking the kingdom. David was fleeing Jerusalem, and Shimei was cursing David, throwing stones at him, all that stuff. And David promises he's not going to do anything to him. But then when Solomon comes on the scene, Solomon puts him essentially under house arrest and says, all right, you cursed my father. You can't go. And then he decides to leave town, and that's when Solomon's like, you don't have permission to go wander wherever, start some type of shenanigan. And so he has Shimei killed. 1 Kings chapter 7, regarding the measurements. Why are the measurements important? So we hear in chapter 7 the measurements of David's house. In chapter 6, there's mention of the temple. So why are these measurements mentioned? First of all, it's kind of we hear back in the tabernacle. In the book of Exodus, God tells Moses how to build the tabernacle. So, they gives the exact kind of dimensions of it. And interestingly enough, so Solomon builds the temple 60 cubits by 30 cubits. All right. And it's 3 stories high. All right. Which is significant because the Noah's Ark had 3 stories. So there's kind of this progression of the ark is kind of like a temple in a certain sense, a floating temple. Okay, and then there's the tabernacle, which was 100 cubits by 50 cubits. So we see Solomon's temple is smaller than the tabernacle, the tent, which really there was a tent in the middle, and then there was kind of a covering around the outside, tabernacle. So it's smaller. So it's smaller, but it has the 3 stories. So for this temple. But chapter 7 makes mention of Solomon's house. And the dimensions are just as high. So it's 30 cubits high. So it's like 3 stories. But it's 100 cubits by 50 cubits. It's almost twice as large as the temple. And we see that Solomon's temple is the size of the tabernacle that God, had affected. So there's undertones that Solomon isn't giving. He's built a beautiful temple, but he's not giving. He's giving more to himself. Actually, his house is as big as the tabernacle was space-wise, and the temple is smaller. So we see that God is kind of being slowly eclipsed, and then later on, Solomon turns to other gods in his later years. So that's why the measurements partly are important, because we kind of, in relation to other things. So yeah, it kind of requires, I had to write them down, just to figure out, okay, I know that the temple is, his house is bigger than temple. I remember reading that, but what exactly? So I got to go find so it's almost twice as much. So in chapter 7 versus his house versus the temple in chapter 6. Let's keep moving on here. We have King Solomon. 1 Kings verse 21. Naboth's Vineyard. So why is this even mentioned? So we hear of Ahab desiring Naboth's vineyard, and then it's kind of like the side story. And we see Ahab. Is it Ahaz? Ahaz pouts. He's kind of pouting. Jezebel gets some men to kind of take out Naboth. But this is an important story. It's partly because what is King Ahaz doing? He's coveting his neighbor's goods. And this isn't actually this. I know a parish in the cities where the pastor had put, apparently the previous pastor had went around this town and was asking, are you willing to give your house or whatever? He wanted to expand the area of the parish, the property, the surrounding area. And I remember being there once, and there was a sign where it says, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's property. And I asked, the current pastor mentioned to me, oh yeah, previous pastor, he kind of was going around and asking. And I think it points, it's really this is Naboth's vineyard, and King Ahaz desiring, it's coveting one neighbor's goods. It's okay to see someone has something nice. Oh, that's nice. That'd be nice. I would like to have that. But then not to go like, I want it, and then to ask. St. Francis de Sales has a beautiful kind of using this passage, describing kind of desire of it's okay to desire good things, but not to desire as in terms of want or even to ask for what someone else has not freely kind of put up for sale. King's next question regarding Mikaya's prophecy in 1 Kings 22. So we hear the king of Judah goes with a king of Israel. They're like, I'm going to go beat Amel Gilead, I believe it is, or someplace. They're going to battle. And so they ask the prophets, and the prophet's like, go up. Yeah, okay. And then the king of Judah is like, well, is there any prophets of the Lord? So essentially the other prophets, it's kind of pointing out, these are like prophets of other false gods, essentially. And Ahaz is like, yeah, there's one prophet, this Mikaya, but he always prophesies what I don't want to hear. Essentially, it's like, whoa, okay. So Mikaya comes in and says, yeah, go up to battle. And Ahaz, he says in chapter 22, well, what do you got to pull? Like, now we don't, assuming that maybe the tone maybe of the prophet was like, yeah, just go up to battle, versus just anything perfunctory, because he's like, probably knowing that the king is not going to like what he has to say. And then it mentions this lying spirit in that account, What does that have to do with a lying spirit? It has to do with these false prophets, that God allows these false prophets to kind of prophesy something that's not true. All right, so it's not that God is directly sent. You can read it as that, but that's not what the intention is. It's the intention of God allows these other false prophets to mislead King Ahaz. All right, he's like, okay, fine, but partly in Scripture when it says God, God, when he commands something, even though he's permitting it, it's showing that God ultimately he's in charge overall. All right, he permits certain things, but he's still Lord overall. And then the last one, I guess this is more of an addition of Baal, Asherah, these other. Well, you'll be reading through these different books of Kings and Chronicles, hear about these sacred pillars and Baal and what is these? Like, why are people worshiping these false gods? Like, what is this? This is ridiculous. Well, and even the golden calf. What's with that? Well, most of these gods that are mentioned in Scripture are mentioned. They're sometimes called, fertility cults, but essentially they're worship of sexual ecstasy. That's what it is, excesses and stuff. So that's what it is. And so we wonder, well, what kind of world was that? Well, look at our world today. All right, so it's not just people bowing down to these statues, but it had all this kind of sexual disorder connected with it. We'll read of cult prostitutes and such, male and female. And so this twisting of God's design of man and woman and the sacredness of marriage, that many of these kind of cults and stuff that influence the Israelites and stuff that really are pervasive, that turn their heart people away from the Lord, are connected with kind of this twisting of sexuality and turning into merely kind of worship of that versus of the Lord. So nothing new under the sun, as we'll read later on in Ecclesiastes. That'll be after Proverbs, I believe. Get done with the Psalms and then Proverbs and then Ecclesiastes. Keep the questions coming.